Hello, everyone. So, this is aimed for the replay team. Thank you so much for joining. And we are going to be live in 2 to 3 minutes with Mr. Jay Pascua. Let me just cut the sound of the music. And I'm just going to a sound check 1, 2, 1, 2. If they are already live in YouTube, just to check if I'm live on YouTube. Yes, I am live on YouTube and I am live on LinkedIn, and we will be joined by Mr. Jay Pascua in few minutes. So bear with me. We are live on LinkedIn also. Yes, we are live on LinkedIn. So welcome everyone. And so a little of recap. This is the book club, and this is the rules of engagement in storytelling. And let me go through the 10 rules. So there will be 10 sessions. Each session will be the rule. And today is the fourth session. Feel free to watch the previous ones on YouTube or on LinkedIn. There is the rule number 1, which was know your audience. The second rule, start with a hook. The third rule last week was establish a connection. The fourth rule of engagement for today, Mr. Jay Pascua and I will talk about do not fear adversity. The fifth rule next Monday will be show, don't tell. Then the sixth rule, create an air of expectation. Ooh, an air of expectation. Love it. Then seventh rule, use emotion. Yeah. The eighth rule, surprise and delight. Love it. The ninth rule, have a strong ending. Have a strong ending. Yes. But this is not the ending. The ending will be the 10th rule, practice and refine. Because it's about learning, practice. Learning, practice, and refine like a sculpture. So thank you so much for watching. And this rule number 4, I was writing some notes and crafting for the menu. There are multiple sub-chapters of the 4th rule, which is do not fear adversity. So was the introduction, then the essence of adversity in storytelling, fostering empathy through shared struggles, adding depth to characters and narratives, the bonding power of overcoming obstacles, collective overcoming as a narrative climax, embracing adversity as the storytelling strategist, authenticity breeds connection, use adversity as a catalyst for growth, craft narratives that inspire hope, surviving life's storms, target practice, a personal story, authenticity, emotional engagement, differentiation, meaningful connection, craft your narrative, engage across platforms, and listen and adapt. So it's part of the refine. So now we are going to tackle the 4th rule of engagement. Do not fear adversity. So whoever is live on YouTube or LinkedIn, feel free to comment your impressions, your remark, your stories also, if you like. And at the 30 minutes, in let's say 30 minutes, I will open the room for any share. So feel free to join the stage in 30 minutes. And so I am waiting patiently, Mr. J, for joining. And I'm really blessed to do this book club because it's about also learning from a really an amazing storyteller. Since 2 years, yes, since 2 years, I've been blessed to hear and then to see Mr. Jay Pascua in action and sharing his story about Guam. Amazing stories, and also to be impressed about his sharing. So I'm just, he will join us a bit later. So I'm going to tackle a bit the fourth rule of engagement. As many knows, he is really amazing. And so this is the reason he is really demanded. So I'm really blessed that he can join us later. So right now I'm going to tackle this as an introduction. The fourth rule of engagement. Let's see. Oh, I'm way far behind. This. So I'm just going through the rules. Am I in the fourth rule right now? I am just going through all the rules. And so what was really impactful for me is that we have all adversities. But at the same time, adversities are different depending on the region we are, the different journeys that are not the same. But at the same time, we are impacted. So as Mr. J might come join later, I already share the stage so that you can join if you would like to join before Mr. J enter in the arena. So here is the link to the stage. And so for the replay team, always feel free to add your comments, your remarks, your insight. I'm really happy to do that. So the fourth rule of engagement, do not fear adversity. I think it's also important to bring hope and faith when we have adversities. So do not fear adversities is a rule that is important in storytelling because a story without adversity is a flat line. Beep. We need to craft struggles in the story. And of course, to go to a point where we overcome our struggles and to give hope. And one of the best examples I was finding when I was remembering that was The Lord of the Ring. The Lord of the Ring, where Frodo and Sam Gadji from Tolkien adapted in cinema. And I was not reading the books, but I was watching the movies. And the adversities are real, you know. The world is challenged because there is a new force coming and with a ring, and the ring has to be destroyed. And so Frodo and Sam goes through a lot of adversities. What was really inspiring for me was that there was not the same characters all around the movie. Was like little episodes, and then was like the story A, B, C, D, and then at some point the story A comes to the story B, and the story B comes to story C and D, and it was like not a flat line of the same personas for like 40, 50 minutes. It was like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes, back and forth. And for me, it's important. It's also important to introduce fun and introduce laughter when it comes to struggle, because we need also to have curves. not like a steep mountain that is like unending, and we have to uh, to realize that are we going to do it? So adversity for me is to conjugate with hope, with resolution, and then new adversity, new resolution, and then going like that. And so what I liked is that he was talking about his stories in Guam. And then when he came to Alabama in 2008, like 3 years later, facing a tornado. So what I was curious to know, because I was, it's one thing to see in the video, in the movies or in the reality, tornadoes or typhoon, but I don't know what it looks like to have a typhoon or to have a tornado, because I never lived that personally. I can imagine, but I was not facing or surviving a tornado. So from stormy telling to storytelling, and it's about connection with your audience, with authenticity, and fostering empathy through shared struggles, because our struggles might not be the same, but at the same time it's about creating a connection, embarking your audience through your stories and through what you have challenged and that you survived. So thank you so much for the audience that are watching right now. Feel free to comment at any point to share your insight. And if you have ever any adversity, and I share the link also on stage, so feel free to join. Mr. J will come a bit later. So empathy through shared struggles, and then adding depth to characters and narrative. And what is the aim of adding depth? It's to realize that every one of us have challenges. And the challenges of real human beings are not the challenges of the leaders of this world. Probably our challenge as normal human beings are like, am I going to be able to survive at the end of the month? Am I going to grow and to thrive within my business? And the leaders of the world, like, oh, I've lost some millions dollars, so I'm going to recuperate. It's the probably more depth, more the challenges are not the same, but we are all struggling at some point. So through adversity, characters transform, evolving from mere entities in a story to living, breathing conduits of human experience. Like we are identifying through Frodo challenge. I think when it comes to Frodo and the Ring, it's about how are we facing our own inner darknesses, from going through the dark to the light. And so with that, I am going to this chapter, the fourth rule of engagement, with a new layer, the bonding power of overcoming obstacles. So, drawing on my experiences as a reporter, he says, in Guam, I remember a story that unfolded in the aftermath of a devastating typhoon. He says also, the adversity faced by the community became a rallying point, and the narrative transformed into a collective tale of survival. So, when it comes to a typhoon, we have all our own inner experiences, but we are facing it as a collective for the people that are facing a struggle. And as he said also in storytelling, adversity isn't just a plot device, it's the glue that binds heart and mind, creating a shared emotional space. And so, collective overcoming as a narrative climax. So a storm, there is a beginning, a zenith, and an end. And so narratives and struggles are crescendo. And at some point, one of the questions that I was asking myself is that, is there a moment where the crescendo is having a pause? I'm sure, because I remember that's why they tackled it in Lord of the Ring. In Lord of the Ring, Frodo and Sam were facing struggles, but at the same point, the scene was cut, and then another scene with Aragorn or any other personas were going through. Well, I was not saying Frodo and Sam Gamgee at once, in the story. I was saying Sam and Frodo, then Aragorn, then Saruman, then others, and it was like cycles. So the way I see that in storytelling, it might be important also to set multiple scenes so that the audience is not too much stressed about the high crescendo. And at some point, it's also important to, after the crescendo, to have some fun. Like crescendo, fun. Crescendo, fun. Because after a bit, it's the crescendo is so high that you might lose your audience, I think. Because the audience is finding, but oh, yeah, I see crescendo, crescendo, crescendo. Where does it stop? So it has been to resolution, and then crescendo, and then resolution, and then crescendo. For me, it's really important because, like, a story that has only crescendo without a pause, without moments of relax, is really not easy to tackle. And at some point, I was also not watching any further movie because the crescendo was going too long. And so it's really important to have also to add pauses after the crescendo. So after that, embracing adversity as the storytelling strategist. So he says also the storytelling strategist, I found that embracing adversity is not just a narrative choice. It's a strategic approach to creating stories that resonate deeply with audiences. Because if the story is only appealing to you and not your audience, what is the reason to share stories? I think we share stories not for us, although we can, but it's like ego. But we share stories also to see if there is a connection through the audience. The story is truly amplifying through the audience, and the audience remembers. And the audience is sharing as ambassadors your own story. So it's really important to have this bond connection with your audience. So authenticity breeds connection. That's also important as storytelling. Use adversity as a catalyst for growth. Like adversity is really important. Of course, we can escape adversity, but it has to be having a scope to serving as a growth. Because I remember this story. It was 15 years ago. I was watching a video, or 10 years ago, from Abraham Tversky. And the reason I remember his name is about his story. He's a Jewish rabbin, and he was not about he was not sharing about the Jewish side, but he was sharing about that he heard the story of a lobster that was stuck in its shell, and at some point the lobster, in order to grow, it has to get out of the shell to be vulnerable and to find another shell. that was really at comfort. And so we are all growing, probably. I'm not sure, but some people are not growing. It's the aim of our life is to constantly grow, and it doesn't mean to be bigger and bigger and bigger, but to find our life a meaning. And so at some point we are in our shell and we are uncomfortable because like there is not so much space. We are growing and our shell is limiting us. So at some point we have to crack our shell and find another one, or to get out our shell and find a one that is suiting our volume. And so he was telling also in his story that most of the people, compared to lobsters, lobsters are daring to get out of the shell to find a new one. Yet some of us are staying in the shell and limiting to our shell and not daring to get out to find a place that is more comfortable for us. And so that's why we are inventing stories to ourselves that are limiting us. We are also telling ourselves like, oh, it's okay. I rather prefer to stay here. It's too comfortable. But as soon as we are growing, we are limiting ourselves, or we are finding reason to stay in our shell. And so most our um, of us are staying in our shell, and we are avoiding to live the life as fully as we would like. And it's not like getting always out of our comfort zone. It's also good to stay and to breathe and to relax. But at some point, the life is limited, and we have to find a reason, a purpose to our life. And so that's why it's important to get out of the shell and to find a shell that is um, adapted to our desires, and to live our life as much as we can with goals and with aspirations. So we are on the 18 minutes of the show, and Mr. J might come join in few minutes. So you are always welcome to join the stage at any time, or to add any comments on YouTube and LinkedIn. And thank you for the replay team to watch us until now. So then, craft narratives that inspire hope. That's it. We need hope. Imagine adversity again and again and again without hope. We need hope. Our audience is resonating also when there is hope. And so he shared in this chapter his story while he was in Guam, surviving a Category 5 typhoon, and then in Alabama, in US, surviving in 2011 a tornado. And so history shows how someone can be resilient in the face of insurmountable odds. So he is still alive. Blessed him and blessed us, because he is really inspiring. And so then he invited us to a target practice. Embrace adversity as a storytelling tool to foster empathy, resilience, and growth. Share stories of overcoming challenges, setbacks, and obstacles, both personal and collective. By acknowledging and exploring moments of struggle and vulnerability, you invite your audience to connect with the humanity behind the narrative. You can recount your own experiences or draw inspiration from historical events. Make sure to highlight the transformative power of resilience and perseverance. Persevere. Don't be severe, just persevere. And so he was talking also about his personal story, and then about authenticity. And so authenticity also in terms of companies and brands and what is the image of your brand. And each of us is human being. Each of us has our own individual brand. For those that are not knowing who I am, my name is Oli. I am a neuro language igniter. I love to help people to learn and improve French through the neuro language approach. Neuro like neuroscience, and language like the language. And I am a language enthusiast. I speak French, English, Dutch, Italian, and very soon Spanish. And I'm really blessed to be there helping you with autonomy, confidence, and joy. We need also to embark our heart with the brain and, of course, the whole body, in fact. And the body is a tool of communication. Whether you are acknowledging or not, your body is communicating. The nonverbal is 92%. So authenticity is really important to foster connection with your audience. And then emotional engagement. That's also so important. Emotional engagement. Stories have the power to evoke emotions, stirring hearts and minds in ways that facts and figures cannot. Emotionally resonant narratives create a profound impact, forging lasting connections with customers and driving brand affinity. And we need also differentiation. And so to really outstand, it doesn't mean to speak louder. You can outstand by speaking your own voice that will differentiate with other voices. So you as a bird can differentiate. If there are a lot of other noises, you can craft your own song, your own voice, and outstand, and people will resonate with you. I strongly invite you to use your own voice, to not try to copy others' voice. Yet, of course, it could be a strategy because I was few years ago through the story that David Attenborough, an amazing naturalist speaker, was helping us to discover an amazing bird that was imitating other sounds. And sadly, you were also hearing the sound of a tree cutter. I don't know the jigsaw. I think no jigsaw. It's my English is not my native language, so it's like the machine that was cutting trees. The bird was imitating this voice because the reason that the bird was imitating voices were to catch attention, probably about other birds. So at some point, he was also imitating like sounds like boop, boop, this kind of sound that the car is doing when you are closing the door, like boop, boop. So it's also to not lose yourself in others' voices. So bear with me because I have a little bit of flu right now, but all is fine. So it's also important to use your own voice because if you are copying other voices, you are losing yourself. You are losing your DNA. And there will be at least 100 of persons all around the world that will resonate with you and with your stories, with your challenges, with your life. So I love to use this quote. I don't recall the name of the one that was telling the quote in my mind, but I remember the quote. And the quote was, each of us were born originals. Sadly, many of us died as photocopies. We try to copy people. Although there is only one Jay, only one Ollie, only one Tony Robbins, there might be people that try, probably not Jay or me, but they are trying to copy Tony Robbins. But we are all 8.2 billion different people. And so I will invite you to stay original, to stay yourself, because you are a unique gift to this universe, and there is someone out there that is loving you for who you are as a unique person. They don't like you because you are copying Tony Robbins. They like you because you are you. You are unique. And your presence is a gift to this universe. Your story is a gift to this universe. So it was also a quote from Maya Angelou, and I don't know this quote by heart, but she was saying like the the worst sadness, and I don't know the quote by heart, but the worst sadness is to not be able to share your story, to not be able to share your life, your story, because there will be always one, 10, hundreds, thousands of people out there, present or in the future, that will resonate with your stories. So whether you are writing your story or voicing to audio or voicing to a video or telling your story to another book or whatever, feel free to share your story. You are unique, and it's not because you are not Tony Robbins and that you are not so much popular that your story doesn't matter. Your story matters. So emotional engagement, differentiation, and then meaningful connection. Why do we share our stories if it's not to connect with people, if it's not to engage and find a resonance through other people? So thank you so much for the people that are joining me on LinkedIn or on YouTube. Thank you also for the replay team. Always feel free to jump on stage or to share your comments or your insights. Sorry. And while we are waiting, Mr. J, we are on the 28th minute. I'm going to move forward. So there are still some sections. Meaningful connection. Meaningful connection. Whether you are an individual, a brand, a business, or someone wanting to share their words, their word with others. Share your word. Your word is unique. My story might be the same as yours, yet we have two different stories. And he says also, as I guided businesses on their storytelling journey, I imparted 3 actionable steps to create compelling brand narratives. Craft your narrative, engage across platforms, and then listen and adapt. So, craft your narrative. Define your brand story with clarity and purpose. What is your mission? What are your values? And what is your unique selling proposition? And although sometimes we say selling like there is like a bit like a struggle in selling, we are selling by being ourselves. And selling might be another definition that you might think. Link these elements into a cohesive narrative that captivates and inspires. Embrace vulnerability and authenticity, sharing the highs and lows of your journey with honesty and transparency. Then engage across platforms. That I like also so much because platforms are different. Your story might be the same, but you gotta present it differently depending on the platform. You are not presenting the same in Instagram, in LinkedIn, in YouTube, or in TikTok. So it's really to adapt to your platforms. And of course, writing a book is not the same as telling your story through a video. with that, here comes the gong. Here comes Mr. The only and unique Mr. J. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Ollie. Man, thank you for being so accommodating and being patient with me.
Well, with salt and pepper, I accommodate.
You're awesome. Um, Ollie, we're dealing with some really changing times, and for some people, it can be really a struggle, right? Um, Dealing with change, pivoting from a career, um, even dealing with things like a shift in politics, right? These are things that, as human beings across the globe, we understand and we know. And because we know that, we have a greater chance of connecting with our audience, keeping that in mind. Earlier today, I dealt with another um, topic, emotional resonance. And I think that goes hand in hand with the fourth chapter, the fourth rule: don't fear adversity. If you are able to connect with your audience emotionally, right, you have a greater chance of engaging them in such a profound way. And I use the story of me first coming on to LinkedIn. So when I arrived to LinkedIn, shout out to Annie Osung and um, uh, Angelica. She's an amazing person. She's the podcast queen, right? And I stumbled onto their event, and they were talking about trauma. And at some point, because the discussion hit me close to home, because I was dealing with PTSD as a result of a natural disaster. I survived a tornado. And that right there, that discussion propelled me to join the stage and provide my insight, my story to the discussion. And that launched a whole bunch of other things. And just that story alone shows the power of overcoming that fear of adversity, using it to connect with the audience and to propel your story even further. Right? Adversity, we know what that's like. We all have our struggles. Now, you may not have gone through a, a storm like I did, but we all go through different storms on a daily basis. The figurative ones, some of the ones that may be even more difficult than overcoming a natural disaster. And that, to me, is a very powerful way of reaching people, especially the ones who are experiencing adversity. And so, if you create fictional characters, what makes them so relatable is the fact that you can see yourself in them. And if you have that, each one of your characters going through some type of adversity, you're going to go, okay, man, Jay is experiencing some pivotal grief right now in this moment. Grief at the loss of opportunities, grief at the loss of home, grief at the loss of his children's naivete towards life being abundant, being free from harm. So there's grief, there's adversity in that trauma, right? Trauma is adversity. And so all of those things put together, even though you've never experienced a tornado, you've experienced adversity. So you understand that component in my story and you can relate. And so I think that's the power in that. Once you've overcome your fear and you're able to use that adversity to impact others in such a way that is meaningful. Your thoughts?
Well, I completely relate. I was not experiencing at all a tornado or a typhoon, and I don't know what are there. I've seen videos, but it's one thing to see videos of it or to hear stories, another thing to really live what it looks like. All the things that I was experiencing were quite heavy rain or a thunderstorm, really chaotic, but not a tornado. Like thunderstorm, like I was in my home, I was seeing what I call son et lumière, which is like flashes and sounds of the thunder. And at some point, I was living probably 3 to 4 of these really intense during my life. One of that, I was in ex-Yugoslavia, was Yugoslavia at that time, with my dad and some friends, and we were on a caravan, and it was like 11 p.m. and was like a thunderstorm, like a flash each 20 seconds, like really wow, and I was scared, but I was not outside. So it's one thing to be there. In when I one story that I would like to share is also at some point I was willing to go back to a place and for celebrating my birthday. It was 3 to 4 years ago, and I was. It was not the same energy that I was years before because it was the second time I was in that place. And at some point, I was a bit like too much adventurous. At some point, I was in the same day walking 48 kilometers in the whole day. Was like wow, was like too much. But at some point, I was also willing to go to an adventure and not to say, okay, I've gone too far. Let me go back or let me try another path. So I was a bit stuck in the forest, and I was like, at some point, I decided to go backwards because it was not possible to go forward. But the day after, 24 hours after, I was in the comfort of my place, and I was living a thunderstorm. And I was thinking myself, what if I were that day walking in the forest? I was glued in that forest and I was facing this thunderstorm. So at some point, it get me realize that at if I decided to make this 24 hours later, I would be caught in that thunderstorm with a huge forest and with a lot of risks, you know. So for me, it's all about back in storytelling, to see also if the story is resonating with the audience. So I think it's also important to also make links between your story and what your audience might face. Imagine if your audience is a group of business people in the same company, and the company is facing some struggles, like there is a huge deficit in the last exercise, and they need to find a way to survive as a company, to limit the layoffs. And so it's really to make a connection between your story and what they are facing. Because I think also, if you are telling your story and no one is finding a way to resonate to your story, then what is the point to tell your story? So either you are telling the details that are resonating with your audience, or either you are choosing a story that might resonate with your audience. Because at some point, it's also is this story serving your audience? Is your story makes an echo, a connection? Because else it's a waste of your energy, of your time, and of their times also. So what do you think about that?
I I agree on several different levels. You know, it's it is that emotional connection, right? It's and how do you connect, right? It's empathy. And so if you see a character experiencing, or if you're reading a character experiencing adversity, you're going to always, in most cases, connect on a different level. It's one thing to talk about or to read about the impact a storm had on a community. But if you read how that storm impacted one person, look at a story about Jay Pascua and his family being homeless and trying to figure out where they're going to live, you're going to have, like most people, most audiences are going to have some empathy for that situation. And sometimes just talking about how that character moved through that trauma, moved through that adversity, allows them to see some things from a different perspective. I talk about how when I was calling around the utilities and I called my satellite cable company to let them know, hey, cut off my service. I just experienced a tornado. The gentleman on the other line said, oh, sorry that you experienced that. I'm going to send you out a box in the mail so you can return the equipment. I lost my entire home. I don't even know where some of any of my furniture is, let alone a digital DVR. I said, let me just see what I can do. And he repeated himself again multiple times. Well, I apologize that you experienced that. Let me go ahead and send you out this box so that you can return the equipment. It could be damaged. I said, I don't even know where it's at.
Yeah, that's he was really lacking empathy and reality. Like
It, yeah. And so absolutely. And so just that one interaction, when I tell the story, it then brings the empathy closer to the audience, right? Now they're having to experience the fact that somebody doesn't have empathy. And now your empathy rises in that moment as you hear or read that story. So adversity allows you to truly connect with that audience, with someone who knows what adversity feels like based on all the emotions surrounding it. Right. And so I talk about it in the book, and you outlined it. I saw all the all around it. Yes, there you go. Look at that. Your diagrams are so unique, but it all points back to do not fear adversity. The it's that bonding power of overcoming obstacles. That bonding power. There's an American movie, Rudy, and it's about this football player or this young man who lives in the shadows of, we say, Notre Dame University, right? Not Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is a very prominent university here, and he wanted to always, he always looked to the football players there as heroes. Now, this young man at the time was not of the stature of other athletes, but he had the biggest heart. I'm not going to spoil the movie, but you should definitely look it up. But he encounters obstacles over and over again as he tries to realize his dream. And by the end of the movie, you're crying in tears and cheering for him. Now, I will spoil this and say that he did realize his dream, but it came about in such a way that it was almost like divine intervention. And that was the big payoff. Overcoming that obstacle and riding along the way every bit of those obstacles. In the end, when Rudy realizes his dream, you're crying and you're cheering all at the same time. Right? And let's say for many people watch it, watch movies at home these days. Not that many people go to the movies like they used to. But when you go to the movies, sometimes you hear people cheering at the climax, at the end credits, because they love the movie so much. So collectively, when you're there as part of a collective, a community of people experiencing that story, that then adds to that narrative climax. As a child, I watched Top Gun. And then as a much older adult, I watched it again. The second part of that story, and you watch as some of the characters have aged, and in particular, you see the adversity they experienced. And now there's a new generation of pilots. And so you're coming to that point in the movie where there's a changing of the guard, but there's a dramatic, and I'm not going to spoil it for those who haven't watched it yet. There's a dramatic changing of the guard in that respect. But handing the torch over from, now, if you watch the original movie, Maverick had a co-pilot. His co-pilot was Goose. Goose dies in the first movie. I'm going to give that away because if you haven't watched the first Top Gun, it's been a long time. Okay. There's been a lot of stories about it. But in this second movie, Maverick has to teach how to be a good pilot to Goose's son. And he rejects his teaching. There's that adversity. There's that struggle. There's that animosity. These are all things we know in our own lives. I haven't. The most I've done is get in a plane, and I've never, I've never actually flown one myself. Flown in one, yes. Fighter jet, nah. But I know, we know human emotion. We know adversity. And embracing that, when you're a storytelling strategist, right? Understanding how that can move a story forward and move an audience forward is priceless, right? You, in order for you to have a really good grasp of the audience and keep their attention, that authenticity in emotion can really grab a person's attention. And so I'm going to tell you about something recently. And the other day I had a, it's on Saturday, I have my story time with Jay and Friends. And I talked about the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, I think it's called, administration, rather. NOAA. They have a fisheries arm that is intent on protecting the giant clamshell. And I agree on the surface, right? We need to protect ecosystems. We need to protect the environment. But what they're saying is anybody who has a giant clamshell pendant in the shape of a new moon they will have to submit and give up their body adornment made from the giant clamshell to any federal official. It will be confiscated by the United States government. And on the surface, that sounds like it needs to happen. But let's really look at it. That body adornment by many people from Guam and the Mariana Islands is seen as a symbol of our ancestors because a lot of those pendants, what we call pendants, were found in the graves of our ancestors as cultural artifacts. Now, there's still some debate as to what it was actually used for because it's not mentioned in any writings. And we don't have a verbal or oral history of it. But the physical manifestation of it exists. And we've used it as a symbol around our necks to say that we come from a proud history. And they want to take it away from us. Now, a lot of us know that many of the artisans that create these body adornment pieces have moved to fossilized clamshells. So they're not living organisms. They are the remnants of a giant clam embedded in rock or found in the ground. And that's what's being used. So it's not actually impacting the current environment. First of all, it's difficult to find any giant clamshells these days. So we understand that there's a finite resource in it. It's much easier to go to a quarry site and pull a giant clamshell, fossilized giant clamshell out of the earth than it is to go swimming for one. And the artisans knew this and switched many years ago. Why is this important? It's important because people understand adversity. Here is a colonial power infringing upon the rights of its citizenry to continue to honoring their ancestors, to continue to be cultural practitioners and make art pieces out of the giant clamshell. And these days, fossilized giant clamshell. The other thing is, I am talking about this to the committee that's considering this move by the federal government. And how do I read diversity that they are going to experience? The artisans of Guam and the Mariana Islands will be impacted, and those will be negative, and those are the people who want to be this potential edict. And I could go on and on, but I won't. But that right there is an illustration, a current one, of how you to speak to and to connect, hopefully, to species. That people are also endangered. Their culture, their heritage, our culture, our heritage, my culture, my heritage. Sally?
Well, there is a lot of to impact about that. I truly believe also that whenever we want or not, there will be decisions made that are out of our control, and it's about how do we react on that, how do we act on what's happening right now. And it's for each of us to realize that no matter what the decisions are from external forces, there are things that we are trying to deal with, and they are not aware about the impact of their own decisions. Like right now, I can talk also, but not too long, but I can talk also to something that is not impacting me, but that I see in US is impacting disabled people with disabilities, and people who is not tied to a gender, people who are not male or female, but are non-binary, and that the recent decisions from a man and his government in US is impacting thousands and thousands and thousands of people in US about their right to be non-binary. And so for me, it's really important to be together. And it's not because I am not surviving a tornado that I cannot advocate for you. It's also to be here for one another, no matter what our challenges, to be there for people, to also give hope. Because with adversities, there is also hope that we gotta find. Else, it's like I was at the beginning of the session talking about the Lords of the Ring, and they were crafting stories in different layers, like Frodo and Sam, and then the other two hobbits, and then Aragorn, and then Saruman. They were crafting layers of stories. They were not crafting one and only chapter with Frodo with all the adventures. There was I, B, C, A, C, D, A. And so it's important also to have moments of joy, moments of hope, and moments of laughter. It's like at some point was Gollum and Sam and Frodo, and they were. It was in the third episode, I think, The Return of the King, where they were seeing a bunch of big elephants, and at some point it was a bit like there in the camp, and then Gollum were saying to Frodo that he was liking fish, but he was not liking potatoes. And so in French, was like saying "Garde tes vilaines frites." It was like it was like so funny. So at some point there are adversities, but at some point there will be not an adversity that is crescendo all over is not sustainable, because at some point the audience is like breathing. We need to inspire and to expire. Seeing only adversities all along without any pause or without any resolution or even any fun thing. It's like inspiring, and at some point we cannot inspire more. So we have to also have the balance of in and out, like breathing. What are your thoughts about that? Well, I cannot hear you.
So the way that you explain it, Ollie, it really is going back to the core of what the chapter is about. And it's connecting with those audiences that you may not know their struggle, their what they're actually going through. We don't know what that's like, right? We don't walk in their shoes or in their skin, but we can understand it from a very human standpoint. The emotions that can occur as a result of what's going on. Yes, what you talked about is impacting thousands upon thousands of people. And if you're trying to connect with those people, if you're trying to connect with an audience that is marginalized, that is almost shunned now, there are people who are scared in this moment because they don't know what's going to happen next. What was once protected is now not. And so there's definitely a fear in that. Now, I live in a state that was the gosh was ground zero for the civil rights movement. I walked in some places that people experienced the violent brutality of that era where there was a civil rights movement. And a lot of people see the destruction of DEI programs, the elimination of them, and the disregard for the Equal Employment Opportunity Act. It's an affront to democracy. That's what some people are saying. And a lot of people don't understand it. And so when there's a lack of understanding, there's usually fear that it's going to be harmful. There's fear that they could experience more adversity as a result. I have a home here in Alabama and I own two now. And I realize the adversity that people in the civil rights movement, what they went through, allowed me to be able to do that. Own a home, live here in the state of Alabama. I'm sitting on the shoulders of giants. And I don't take that lightly. But to share in hope, to share in the struggle in this moment, the struggle to overcome fear. It's tough. It's tough. I think that we have a long road ahead. And so it's really incumbent upon us to try to do better. And by sharing our stories, even stories through or and of adversity, it's important for us to recognize it so that we don't do it again. So I think I want to end on the note that it's adversity in your storytelling shouldn't something that you should fear. You should actually utilize it as much as you can in order for the story to be as strong as it could be. And I've got to leave in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to get your thoughts, Ollie, before I do leave.
Well, thank you. And it was really inspiring to hear from you, and also to hear things that I was not aware. And I'm not in US, so what you are living right now in US, I might not grasp, but it's all for reminding us that adversity is part of life, that at some point on in our life we will going to live adversity, and my adversity might not be yours, but it was impacting me, like when I was 13 years old, even before, when I was living the illness of my mom, and then she passed away on brain cancer, and I was in the dark. And so I'm alive. I'm 48 right now, and I'm alive, and I'm doing my best to find a meaning about life. And I found my meaning, that I'm going to do my best to live purposely in my life. And so with that, I will the next week, the fifth rule will be show, don't tell. And I love it because it's about letting your audience resonate, and to whether it's about books or movies. Movies is more difficult because movie there is one scene and the audience see the picture. But with books, there are millions of interpretation, millions of images. But my image of the hero of the story might not be yours. So it's about letting your audience autonomous about, you can describe as much as you can, but your audience will have their own interpretation at the end, because it's their world. You have your vision of your story, your world, and each of your audience has their own world. And so with that, Mr. Jay, thank you so much for another amazing Monday. See you next Monday, same time, for the fifth rule of engagement. And thank you, Yadish Valji and I Am the Noise Opera for joining us, and also the replay team. What are your final words, Mr. J?
That the ability for us as storytellers to connect with one another can simply happen as a result of the adversity we experience. I brought this story up a couple of times. Many of us watched a movie that we thought would be centered around a very prominent athlete. Everybody around the world knows who Michael Jordan is. And we know some of us have even bought his shoes over the years. Right? And we watched a movie called Air. And a lot of people don't realize that that was a huge commercial that lasted for 2 hours. But the story was compelling. And guess what? It wasn't really centered on Michael Jordan. It was centered on a Nike executive who was trying to court this young phenom named Michael Jordan. He, that Nike executive, was the protagonist in the story, not Michael Jordan. Now, I did not see anybody get up from their seats at any time and during the movie and leave, not come back. I did not see any of that. Why? Because the story was compelling. The adversity this Nike executive experienced, and Nike, the company in general, I didn't know it was on the verge of collapse at that point. And this executive helped to not only survive that moment in time, but allow the entire company to thrive. Overcoming adversity. And so in the next chapter, when we talk about show, don't tell, that's just as important. And not that many people know, but I am a visual artist as well. I paint. And while there may not be a description of my paintings, they do. But if you saw my painting or paintings, you would already formulate a story inside your brain about the painting, good, bad, or indifferent. You would have a story already in your brain. If I showed you my painting of a sunset, what are some of the things that come to mind? Now, the sunset is off in the horizon, above the water, behind the trees, on land. Just saying those very words, you already have a picture in your mind, and the story is already there. Why? Because I showed you, I didn't just tell you. And you can do that in text. You can do that in your writing. If I said, I went to a coffee shop that was filled with books from the floor to the ceiling. And you wonder, how do people get the books at the top shelf close to the ceiling? You can smell the coffee, the cappuccino, the froth. You can feel the steam coming from behind the counter as they make the cappuccino, the espresso. If I shared that, just like I did there, could you imagine the scene? Now, if I just said I walked into a cafe and I drank a cup of coffee and then I left, did you get the sense that I went into a cafe that was in Europe that had books? No, you never know that. So you'd have to show and not tell.
Yeah, painting the story.
Absolutely. Painting the story. And as an actual painter, I know what that's like.
Exactly. So that's a blessing to hear you that, because you are crafting amazing stories. So, Mr. J, see you next Monday, and thank you again for the replay team. And see you soon. Keep shining, everyone.